They said to me, we think you've got TB, tuberculosis. And I remember thinking, I can't have tuberculosis. That's the sort of disease that my grandma would have. And she said, oh, because you're a teacher, and because you see so many different families from all over the world, she said, we think you could possibly have TB. And I remember thinking, this is really strange. Hi, I'm Natasha, and I am from England, Yorkshire in England, and I was diagnosed with stage 4 EGFR-positive lung cancer in January 2023. Cancer for me has been completely life-changing. My life is unrecognisable from what it was prior to my diagnosis. Pre-diagnosis, I was a busy teacher, a mum, I was driving. Post-diagnosis, I can no longer drive because I've got brain mets. I've had to retire, and I am busy working with EGFR-positive UK to help raise awareness of lung cancer. I first of all started suffering with a hoarse voice it would have been round about May 2022. In England, it was our Queen's Jubilee weekend, and I noticed I had this sort of croaky, sort of deep voice, and we went to a party to celebrate the Jubilee, and I remember laughing about it and didn't think much of it really, and I started with sort of a dry cough, and again didn't think much of it. I thought, I'm a busy teacher, busy mum, just sort of juggling all those balls and just in the air, juggling the balls in the air, and didn't think much of it. And so I didn't go to the doctors or anything. Fast forward a couple of months, August time, I noticed that the hoarse voice was still there, and the cough was still there, and I noticed that my breathing started getting squeaky, and like a crackly breathing. So if you can imagine a dog's squeaky toy, or a door opening and closing, that's what my breath sounded. My breathing sounded very, very wheezy, and it was my colleagues at school who said to me, this doesn't sound right. I mean, I remember laughing about it, sort of saying, this is my party trick, nobody else can breathe like this. And again, I didn't think it could possibly be lung cancer, because I naively always associated lung cancer with smoking. And I was very fit. I used to rock climb, mountain bike, hike. To be honest, I still mountain bike and rock climb now, but I don't rock climb anymore. I still mountain bike, and I still hike. But so as my colleague said to me, this doesn't seem right. Maybe you've got long COVID, or maybe you're developing asthma. So I sort of put off going to the doctors for a while, and eventually I thought, this isn't right. So I made an appointment with my general practice and my GP, and went down, and she was absolutely on it. And she said to me, she gave me a chest exam and said, there doesn't seem to be anything untoward. It doesn't sound like asthma. I think you better go for a chest x-ray. And she said, I remember her saying to me, what do you think it is? And I thought, I don't know what this is. So anyway, a couple of weeks later, because again, I didn't see any urgency. A couple of weeks later, I went down to have my chest x-rayed. And I remember saying to the radiographer something along the lines of, I'm sorry if I'm wasting your time. You're not going to see anything. And she said, I remember what she said was really strange. And she said something along the lines of, I can't promise anything. And I was like, a bit strange. Anyway, again, didn't think much of it. 2 days later, I got a phone call from Leeds, that's my nearest city, Leeds Chest Clinic, asking to see me. And then my my general practice doctor phoned me up as well, and she said, "Have you heard from the hospital yet?" And I was like, "What's going on here?" And she said, "We've found some consolidation on your lung." I I did not know what consolidation was. I'd never even heard of that term before. And I was like, "What do you mean, consolidation?" She said, "Oh, it's probably nothing to worry about." She said, "It's a shadow on your lung. Probably she said, probably some sort of infection." I was like, "Right, okay." So I went down to see the chest clinic a couple of days later. And they said to me, "We think you've got TB, tuberculosis." And I remember thinking, I can't have tuberculosis. That's the sort of disease that my grandma would have. And she said, "Oh, because you're a teacher and because you see so many different families from all over the world," she said, "we think you could possibly have TB." And I remember thinking, this is really strange. And she said to me, "Right, so you can't go back to school because you are a public health risk. So you have to go into isolation." And I was like, "Oh, great." So it felt like lockdown again. It all felt like COVID again. And I just remember thinking, this isn't right. It just doesn't feel like infection at all. I started having more CTs and various other things. And I had swabs and I had bronchoscopies, and they couldn't find any infection at all. And a couple of months later, they said to me, "Right, okay, we can't find any TB. We're going to have to start thinking about more serious diagnosis, which could possibly be cancer." And I remember, oh gosh, it happened on the 10th anniversary of my father-in-law's death, and he died of lung cancer. And so, and I just remember thinking, I can't have lung cancer because I don't smoke. And I remember thinking that. I remember just thinking that I can't have lung cancer because I don't smoke. And it just didn't it seemed so hard to sort of process. And I remember it was just like the world just sort of stopped. Anyway, at that point, it wasn't an official diagnosis, and the team was saying we still are going to be looking for infection. Anyway, fast forward, I ended up having the PET scan and so on. And then they found, when I did get diagnosed, my primary tumour had grown so quickly that I had a 6.5 centimetre diameter tumour. The day before my chemotherapy was supposed to start, I got called in to see my oncologist. And I remember him just sitting there with his head in his hands, and he just said, "I'm so sorry, there's been an oversight. We can't start chemotherapy. We're going to have to restage you in order for you to have surgery." So I had a CT scan, but by this point I'd started to have headaches as well. And I mentioned the headaches, and he said, "Right, okay." He said, "Although you had a head CT 5 weeks ago, we'll give you another head CT today, and we'll see what happened. We'll see what's what." Anyway, so I had a head CT as well as a thoracic chest CT, and they found 3 brain mets in my brain. So I very quickly moved from stage 3 to stage 4. I was told I was inoperable. I was told it was incurable. My initial reaction, it was just absolute shock. I got a phone call. So it was 2 hours after I'd had the head CT. I came home, and luckily I had my mum and dad with me. And I got a phone call from my cancer nurse specialist. And she said to me, she said, "Where are you?" And as soon as she said to me, "Where are you?" I just knew. And she said, "Where are you?" That's her first question. Her second question is, "Are you in the house alone?" And I just thought, "Oh, crikey." And then the third question, the third thing she said to me was, "Can you sit down, please?" And she told me, and I thought, the first thing I said was, "How long have I got?" I just thought she was going to tell me I had, 4 weeks, 5 weeks. She said, she said we found 3 brain mets, and I just remember thinking, how long have I got? I've got 2 teenage girls. Um, I need to be here for my girls. I need to be here for my family. And I think I went into complete shock. I remember just standing up, and I remember I couldn't feel my fingers and my feet. And I went completely my hands went numb. And I remember just walking and pacing the perimeter of my front room. And my dad ended up taking over the phone call. And it was just, it was almost disbelief, but panic. And then very quickly, my cancer nurse said to me, she said, look, don't worry. She said, don't worry. She said, you can go on to Tagrisso, you can go have osimertinib. And lots of people can take this drug for many, many years, and it's very, very successful with many people. And as soon as she started saying that, she brought me down, as in, so I was in this mass panic, and then I started to calm down. And then I just remember feeling like I was the eye of the storm, and I'd created all this chaos around me. And so my mum and dad sort of went into panic. The girls sort of, obviously we had to tell the girls, my husband, my friends, my family. And I just remember feeling guilty and thinking, I've created this craziness, this chaos. And I remember just sitting there thinking, I'm like the eye of the storm here. And then just thinking, I have to fight this because I have to be here. I have to be here for my girls. I took my first Tagrisso osimertinib tablet 2 days later. And I remember feeling really optimistic and really, I think excited's the wrong word, but really hopeful, because I'd heard so much good news and so many good reports about Tagrisso. And I remember I felt like it was the start of my new life. And I remember sitting in the car coming out of, I'd got my prescription, and I sat in the car, and I remember taking the tablet in the car. I didn't even wait till I got home. And I just remember thinking, this is going to give me extra life. And to be quite honest, I've tolerated it really, really well. I had minimal side effects. So I had a few skin issues. I had sort of like acne skin. And I've been given antibiotics in order to target that. I sort of had like a rash which started in my feet and started traveling all up my body. And at first I didn't phone it in because I didn't want them to take me off the medication. And then it started swelling. and it was my husband said, you really need to phone this one in. But I was so scared that I was reacting to it and they were going to stop. Anyway, I did phone it in, and they just gave me an antihistamine. And so I take a daily antihistamine to target the or like the allergic reaction, if you like. I take a daily antibiotic to help with the skin problems. I do still get headaches. I get very dehydrated, and I need cramps, so I need to drink lots and lots of water. But all the side effects are quite manageable. I do get very tired, and I do get brain fog as well. So I have had to retire. But to be honest, you think about the side effects of chemotherapy, or some chemotherapies. And so with a targeted therapy like Tagrisso, actually, you're not tied to a hospital. You don't have to go for infusions. And it means that you can, albeit my life has changed, I can lead, a fairly active, really happy life. Now, the reason why Tagrisso as well is so effective, for if you don't realise, it crosses the blood-brain barrier, which means that it was targeting the 3 brain tumours that I had in my brain as well. I have been looking at maybe having some surgery, because initially I was told that I was inoperable. But thanks to Young Lung Initiative, I found out that people in the US were having surgery at stage 4. So I put together the evidence and the research, and I approached my oncologist, and he said, "Okay, let's have a little look at this." And so we were doing a restaging, and this is only a couple of months ago, restaging just to see whether or not we could do the surgery. And I had a brain MRI, and they found a new brain met in my brain, which means that Tagrisso has stopped working. We think I'm probably it's probably oligo progression just on that one met, which means that I've had to have that treated with gamma knife now. And that happened really quickly. So I have had gamma knife. We are still waiting for the next brain MRI to see if that's worked. We're hoping to goodness that has worked. Yes, I've had gamma knife, and I'm still on Tagrisso, osimertinib as well, because hopefully that is keeping the main tumour under control. That's what we're hoping. Losing my driving licence, because that you don't realise how much you rely on your car, on your driving licence. I feel like my independence has been taken away, and I feel like I have to rely on people. So that's been a huge challenge, having to, like I say, having to rely on other people for lifts, places, and so on. But also, I think having to retire from my job. I'm a primary school teacher. I've been, the majority of my career was spent teaching 6 and 7 year olds, and I loved it. It gave me so much joy, and I was so proud. I was really proud of being a teacher. And every day, no matter, you might have been, no matter what your problems are at home or outside of school, you walk in and the children just lift you. And, it's just so, you just immerse yourself in the school environment, and it is fabulous. And having had that taken away, I found that really, really hard, because it is part of my identity. It's something I've done for the last 27 years, and something I'm really passionate about, and something I absolutely love. And so I found that really, really difficult. And I combated that by starting to get more involved in EGFR-positive UK, which is a charity to support EGFR-positive patients. So I became a trustee, and I think I threw myself into that because I felt like I needed some sort of purpose. I'm sure lots of people use this, BC, so before cancer, and everything was so carefree. Didn't worry about a thing. Had little niggles and little worries, but nothing. When you've got your health, you have everything. And living to every 3 months, that 3 monthly cycle of CT scans and brain MRIs, and it's really tricky, because you get your results and you're hoping for stable. And if they're stable, then it's like, brilliant, let's go. But then as the next 3 months start to creep up onto you and you're due your next round of scans, then that anxiety hits again. And so, yeah, I think I've always been a very positive, happy person. And I still try and look for the positives even now within this diagnosis. I mean, I've done some incredible things. I've been invited to Westminster, to the House of Parliament. I've been on TV. I'm chatting to you now. I've been on the radio. I've had some really incredible experiences. I've met some wonderful, wonderful people. I've travelled places that I wouldn't have travelled, but it's always sort of sat on your shoulder. Cancer's sat on your shoulder, and you wake up in the morning and it's still there, and you try not to let it consume you, but it's hard. You can't forget it. I mean, occasionally you can, but then you remember again, because obviously you're taking tablets or you've got the side effects and whatever. So yeah, I think I was really carefree. The weekend before I was misdiagnosed with TB, we went away up to Scotland and we had some selfies in the car, and we just, being a bit silly and taking photos and things. And I remember whenever I look back at those now, I think I'm not that person anymore. And we went to go and see a concert as well. We went to go and see a band play a gig, and it was, we were all just laughing and took photos and things. And again, I look at that and think, I'd love to be that person again. But I am where I'm at, and I've got to just put one step in front of the other. I can't have any regrets. I can't get angry at the misdiagnosis. I can't. People say to me sometimes, they say, why don't you take the doctors to court, or why don't you do so? Why don't you fight the fact that you were misdiagnosed, and aren't you really angry about it? And I'm like, no, I can't be, because I can't have that negative energy in my life. I need to channel the positives. There's enough rubbish going on with dealing with cancer without dealing with all that negativity as well. Anybody with lungs can get lung cancer. And, there's this big stereotype, isn't there, about lung cancer, that you have to be older, that it's a male disease, that work in heavy industry. Well, that's not true. Lung cancer is on the rise in younger women. There's been, in Britain anyway, there's been a 32% increase in the last 30 years. So there's been a 35% decrease in the number of men in the UK receiving a lung cancer diagnosis, whereas the women has risen by 32%, which says, it says something. And there's lots of younger patients these days. And so I think it's about knowing the symptoms. And if you've got a cough for more than 3 weeks, or if you've got a constant backache, or if your shoulders ache, or if you've got a lump in your neck, or if you've got a hoarse voice, or squeaky breathing, go and get it checked out. Because lung cancer, it doesn't matter your age, your gender, your ethnicity. It can affect anybody. All you need is lungs to get lung cancer. And I think that is the main message that I would try and get out there, trying to get rid of the stigma that, that it's a smoking disease, because it's not. It really isn't.